In 1938, the Australian government gave soldiers a piece of land to farm on as compensation for their efforts during World War I. However, these soldiers had little farming experience, and little did they know they were about to enter the Great Depression. This is not all that they were facing. They were on the brink of another war, but with emus. This is the story of the Great Emu War. Stay tuned to learn more about this crazy time in history. Emus normally would not be in contact with humans until breeding season, but the soldiers were farming crops that they could not sell due to the Great Depression. So the emus stayed due to food access, and the farmers were not very happy. The farmers asked the Australian government to send a military presence, and the government agreed. The government thought declaring war on these emus and recording it would be good propaganda. So they went to war with these emus and used, at the time, the new state-of-the-art machine gun. They found groups of emu and opened fire on them, but the emus ran faster than the soldiers could adjust their guns. Even if the emus got hit by a bullet, they had thick enough skin that it would take multiple bullets to kill them. The army only killed a couple hundred emus compared to the emu population at the time of 10,000. So the government's efforts to help these farmers and create propaganda failed, and the farmers still were facing the massive emu population destroying their crops. The farmers advocated for another attempt to exterminate the emus, and the Australian government agreed. The government embarked on another campaign to try and finish these emus off once and for all. This attempt also did not work. They killed about 2,000 more emu, but this was still not enough. The government had to try and figure out a new way to get rid of the emus. They implemented a bounty system on the emus, which finally helped the farmers continue farming.
Was born on December 16, 1907 in Rastenburg, East Prussia, to Hans Hermann Scharf and Else Scharf. Hans's father was a Prussian army officer before and during the First World War. His father would end up dying in World War I due to wounds he received on the Western Front in France in 1916. He would receive 3 medals for his war sacrifices, which made Hans incredibly proud. In 1939, during the summer, he went on a visit to Graz, Germany. By this time, World War II broke out, so he was stranded in Germany during the war. He eventually got a job there and worked until he was drafted into the war. His wife, Margaret Scharf, eventually figured out that he had been drafted into the war. She pleaded and begged to have her husband not be on the front lines, but rather work in communications because he was fluent in English. He was transferred immediately to Company 12, based in Wiesbaden, to serve as a German-English interpreter. He was slated to be stationed in Russia the next day. During the war, Hans worked in the interrogation unit and interrupted conversations between the Germans and the Allied fighters they had captured. After watching the way the Germans abused and physically beat the Allied fighters into confessions, he vowed to come up with a better way to interrogate future captured individuals. His new technique would use kindness instead of torture for confessions. He would be kind and get the information out of them after World War II. He immigrated to the United States and taught many classes on interrogations and helped the American interrogators be better at their craft. He would go on to create many beautiful mosaics in the United States. One of his most famous mosaics is a 15-foot wall telling the story of Cinderella in the Cinderella Castle in Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. He also has a marble mosaic in the California State Capitol building, the mosaic entry ramps at Disney's Epcot Center in Florida, a large outdoor building facade mosaic at Dixie College in Utah, and the mosaicked eagle floor at the University of Southern California campus. He would later die in 1992, leaving his business to his stepdaughter, who would die in 2022.
John Clem was born in Newark, Ohio on August 13, 1851. He ran away from home and his parents at the age of 9 after his mother died due to a train. He initially ended up in the army and tried to enlist in the infantry, but was told he was too young and small. So he was put in the army, but as a drummer boy for the Union Army in the Civil War. The officers of the infantry that he drummed for raked up enough money to pay a normal soldier's pay of $13 a month. He eventually built up a reputation through a legend that in the Battle of Shiloh, a piece of shrapnel hit his drum, causing him to be knocked unconscious. This ended up giving him the nickname Johnny Shiloh, but historical evidence later proved that he couldn't have been in the battle. Later on in his army career, at the age of 12, he would end up retreating. As they were retreating, he would shoot and kill a Confederate colonel. After the battle, he was promoted to sergeant. He is the youngest soldier to be given such a title. He would later be decorated for his heroics at Chickamauga. In late 1863, he was captured by Confederate soldiers in Georgia. The soldiers took his uniform and his hat, which had bullet holes in it. He was incredibly mad that they took his uniform. After the Civil War, he graduated from high school in 1870, but he still wanted to work in the Army. But it would not be as smooth as he would have hoped, because he failed the exam to enter into the military. Luckily, the president at the time, Ulysses S. Grant, had heard of his story and appointed him as second lieutenant in an infantry regiment in 1871. He would be promoted to quartermaster in 1906. He was forced to retire from the military because of his age and was put on the retired list in 1916 as the rank of Major General. He would later die in 1937 at the age of 86. He had a very long and successful life.
World War II was on the brink of ending, and the Germans knew that their time was limited. They decided to use this time to try and get rid of all of their secret weapons. These weapons were put on a submarine destined for Japan, which included a lot of uranium. The Nazis had this uranium to try and make a uranium bomb, but didn't get enough of it to create this bomb because the Allies were closing in on them. With little time left, they sent this uranium to Japan so that they could make a dirty bomb. A dirty bomb is a bomb that has a plethora of different chemicals combined in it. This bomb was supposedly supposed to hit the United States West Coast. The Japanese disguised their submarines to look like the United States so that it would be hard for the United States to detect them. These submarines could launch planes from them, so that is how the bomb would be dropped. But the uranium-filled submarine was captured on its way to Japan, and the uranium on board was seized. The United States would put the uranium to use. The uranium would make it to Japan, but as American-made bombs. Hiroshima and Nagasaki would be hit by these nuclear bombs made with uranium that was originally supposed to be used by Japan on the US. This is, however, taken as false by the United States government. It would be smart, however, to say this if you were the United States government, because the uranium came from the Nazi submarines. In 1942, the Polish military came across a young boy with an unusual dilemma. The young boy had a baby bear cub that he found, and the boy asked the soldiers if they would take it, and the soldiers agreed. This would create one of the most bizarre events in history. This is the story of Wojtek, a Syrian brown bear turned soldier. Stay tuned to learn of this bear's story. Wojtek would spend his younger years in army camps with the soldiers that raised him. When Wojtek was small, he could not swallow properly, so the soldiers gave him milk out of a vodka bottle. He would be rewarded by the soldiers when he did what they asked, and his reward was beer, which would become his favorite. He would eat cigarettes lit by the soldiers. He would keep the soldiers warm at night by sleeping with them. He could salute and loved to fight with the soldiers. He would become their mascot and would follow them all across the globe. He enlisted in the military so that he could be transported to Italy to fight alongside them. Wojtek would carry the soldiers' ammo to them. People question the truth in this story, but an ex-military member has recounted seeing a bear carrying crates. The ammo crates were about 100 pounds, usually taking about 4 men to carry them. After World War II, Wojtek was stationed in Scotland with the rest of his group. Wojtek ended up being donated to Edinburgh Zoo, where he would spend the rest of his life. Soldiers visited him while he was at the zoo, bringing him cigarettes and beer and throwing them to him in his enclosure. Wojtek died in 1963, living for about 21 years and weighing roughly 1,100 pounds and close to 6 feet tall. He is forever immortalized in history with his many statues and stories told about him. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Like and comment on more stories you want me to cover on the channel.